Hello, good evening. Thank you very much for joining today. I think it's a very busy session for the student, end of the semester, where you give dialogue to this program. And so I'd like to express my first thank you to all the students. And UTokyo Center for Global Education's GlobE, we do this regular dialogue series from the last few months, and then we already did like 12 dialogue series. Today is the 13th dialogue series, and in this dialogue series we invite very influential peoples around the world. So aiming to encourage the students to be global leaders, to get some inspirations to tackle the global problems, issues, and challenges, and also find some kind of opportunity how to promote yourself as a global leaders. It's in a different field, and then sometimes in education, sometimes in business, sometimes in arts. So today we have very great personality in front of us, and hoping to get his experiences, and from his experiences how you can learn, how you can act and react the opportunity that's available in our world. So first I would like to welcome Mr. Shuzo and Shiota. Please welcome him with a big hand. With Mr. Shiota, we have a very great influential scholars from the UTokyo. She will engage in the dialogues today. So I'd like also welcome her in this stage, Professor Yoshihara. So today we try to make these programs very informative, very interactive, and kind of informal. So the basic structures. So I will first introduce two great people, and they will do dialogue. So it makes easy for you to get ideas what he's doing. And after that, we'll open the floors. So you can engage for these more interactions. Maybe you have more questions and like to maybe get some ideas from his experiences. So before start the dialogue, let me introduce briefly about Mr. Shiota. And he is the president and CEO of Polygon Pictures, which is one of the oldest and most successful digital animation studios that committed to do what no others has done in unparalleled quality for all the world to see and enjoy. So having been raised in the United States and Japan and studied at Sophia University, Shiota worked for the Nippon Steel Corporations before taking part in the launch of Dream Picture Studio in 1997. Since moving to Polygon 2 years later, he has spearheaded effort to cultivate Polygon's overseas presence, helping the studio to become a leading developer of TV series and contents targeted at the foreign market. For his great work, he has already awarded very prestigious international award. He was a recipient of the 25th Japan's Media Art Festival in 2022, and also a Hall of Frames Award from Animations magazines in the US in 2023. He is a member of the Academic of motion pictures, arts, and science. Great. So, with him, our great scholars, Professor Mari Yoshihara, will be engaged in the dialogue. So please let me also introduce briefly, get to know a little about her background, so it will be more kind of interesting, and we can easily follow the dialogue. Professor Mari Yoshihara joins GlobE in 2024. She is a scholar of American studies who graduated from the UTokyo and earned her MA and PhD at Brown University in the United States, and has built a career at the University of Hawaii since 1997. She has published extensively in both English and Japanese on topics as genders and Orientalism, Asians and Asian Americans in Western classical music, and the legendary American music Leonard Bernstein. She also published prolifically for the non-academic research literacy, including her recent memoirs about living in two languages and culture. Under the cross-appointments between UTokyo and the University of Hawaii, she now split her time each year between two homes. Once again, let's welcome both of them with a big hand before we start. So, we'll give you 35 minutes to 40 minutes for your dialogue. So after that, we'll open the floor for the questions. So if you have any materials, if you like to show films or anything while doing this dialogue, so please feel free and let us know.
All right.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Dipesh. Thank you all for coming. It's nice to see you on this much cooler than in the afternoon evening. As Dipesh introduced, my name is Mari Yoshihara. I'll be moderating this conversation. Is it better with or without the microphone? With. Okay. All right. So I know that Shuzo and Polygon are very famous in the animation world, but just like I'm a book reader, just like I don't always pay attention to which publisher published my favorite novels, maybe some of you are very familiar with Polygon works without knowing that Polygon was a producer, right? So let's first watch this film, the reel that Shuzo prepared for us, just so that you can become familiar with the work that Polygon does.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's very humble. I feel smarter already being amongst the University of Tokyo people. And so I run a company called Polygon Pictures. Very shortly, we've been around for 41 years. We have a studio in Tokyo, about 250 people. We have a studio in Malaysia, of about 50. And then we have a studio in India, currently the newest one that we started like 2.5 years ago, about 15 people. And this is what we do. Thank you. So yeah, this is only a couple of years ago. It's kind of old. Needs to be updated. More recently, we have a show called My Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man coming out from Marvel series. And then, importantly for us, because we're part producers, there's this film called Hypnosis Mike, which is like massively popular now in the world, coming out in theaters end of February. So yeah, please check them out as well.
Cool. So we will talk about this more obviously, but so we invited Shuzo today because he's the president and CEO of Polygon and he's a key leader of this global industry. But there's a little bit more direct reason why this event happened, which is our personal connection that goes way back. Shuzo and I knew each other in the late 1970s and early 1980s. We both lived in California at the same time. Both of our fathers were expat Japanese corporate businessmen, and so we were living there, right? And then we lived in different parts of the Bay Area, so we went to different schools, lived in different areas, but on Saturdays, we took the bus to San Francisco for the Japanese language school, Nihongo Hoshuko. And that's where I was classmates with Shuzo's sister, who is here with us today, and that's how we know each other. So that was a very particular, I mean, for me personally, having spent those years in California was very formative to not only to my character, but my outlook on life, worldview, and eventually my career. Tell us about your cultural upbringing, what those California years, and then also coming back to Japan, like what that has meant for you.
Yeah, so I was born in Hyogo, Kobe, 1967, and then when I was 6, I moved to Los Angeles. Again, my dad was a Sumitomo banker. Back in the early 70s, this was when Japanese companies started to have prominence in the American markets, like Toyota and Datsun and Panasonic and all that kind of stuff, And so when these manufacturers, companies go overseas, the banks will follow to finance their activities, which is why my dad was commissioned there. And your dad was doing what?
He was in Shosha.
Trading firms, né? Trading firms actually, so there's like a hierarchy in which dad went to which companies, and it usually shows in the amount of money they're being paid and the quality of housing that they're being provided. And Shosha is actually better than the bankers, especially
well, there are different kinds of
Shoshas,
Shoshas, but anyway.
Sumitomo Bank's kind of cheap, So yeah, there was like an hierarchy. But anyway, so I moved to Los Angeles, 74. I brought a few. I mean, normally I do talks with slides and stuff, because this is a dialogue. I just brought funny pictures. But so this is me, in the early 70s. So to give you a cultural backdrop as to what that meant. Being in Japanese in the early 70s, or being Asian in general, was totally not cool. And so like this time and age where we have so much inbound people coming in, and people so cognizant about Japanese culture in general, pop culture especially, it's just mind-blowing, because I wish I could have told myself in 1974 in LA, that this would happen, because it totally wasn't happening then. I remember like when I first moved and started to learn English, and there was some person asked me, "Oh, you guys eat fish raw, don't you?" Ooh, kind of stuff, and it's like, and I look at the encyclopedia that was there in the school, it's most totally wrong. And there was like samurai drawings and stuff, and it was really weird. But so anyway, we were infatuated by American culture. In Japan, so driving a geisha, foreign car, was just an emblem of being rich. So anything that is like foreign was kind of cool, And so we were just enamored by American culture. I still remember our first days moving, buying my first jeans, having my parents buying my first jeans was so tough, but it was like, oh, this is my first jeans. Having bought my first lunchbox, oh my god, this is a lunchbox, and had like thermo inside, that was so cool. And then I remember like electric toothbrushes, it's a Mickey Mouse with a toothbrush on top of his head. It's like like electric toothbrush, oh my god, technology, you know? And like went to Lower East for steaks, and it's like, oh my god, big steaks. Everything was big in the States, you know, and so super infatuated, but also there was like a complex because I was smaller, you know, and Americans seemed so big. And so I spent I spent 9 years there, 3 years in Los Angeles, and then 5 years, I guess, like in San Francisco, and then a year and a half, and then Palo Alto, before it became Silicon Valley. Trying to fit in, I mean, trying to be as American as possible, because that was my route to survival. And because like I was born a Catholic, and my parents would put me in like all Catholic schools, and so it was mostly white, other than for my sister, it was mostly white. So I kind of had to, like, I tried so hard to be as American as possible. So I spent 9 years, and this is around when we met Mari. So I mean, Momoko gave me these photos because apparently we used to exchange like student photos, right? Momoko, Mari. So yeah, so I remember riding the bus together, and they were just like they were like one grade below me. And I tell Mari all the time, you guys used to sing like Air Supply, all out of love, like really loud, you know. It's like the bus was arrived like 15 minutes, and it was just quite annoying, and I still remember that. But anyway, so I got pretty good at being American by the time I was like in high school. So second year of high school, moved to Palo Alto, which was kind of cool because it was the most diverse environment that I've ever been in. It was a public school, not a Catholic school. And so it was kind of cool, you know, and like in the States back then, it was not as conservative, you know. By the time you were in high school, we were drinking like alcohol and stuff and doing whatever I was doing like now. And in 6 more months and I get a driver's license, which is like freedom, you know. And so I was just so much looking forward to it. But then my dad got commissioned back to live in Japan, so this is me. The same year, September 1982 is on the left, and December 1982 on the right. This is a photo to take a entrance exams to high school. So like, I spent so much effort trying to be as American, and then I come back, and then I never been to a Japanese school, but I have to take high school exam, and I'm back in Kobe, and it's just like, I mean, it was like the weirdest time because like I mean 1982. This is way too back that you guys don't know, but there was a thing called Konai Boruku. And so Japanese schools were kind of like very volatile, you know, and everybody was doing things like menchiki, which is like stare in a very Japanese way to pick fights and stuff, and I had to learn the protocol stuff, you know. Anyway, so it was
it's very scary in a lot of ways, the contrast. I mean, going from color to monochrome seems symbolic of a lot of things.
Yeah, I know, because like, yeah, the entrance exam on the photo was, it was deemed to be not color. It was deemed to be black and white, you know, and everybody in Kobe, when you're in junior high school, you have to shave your head. So here's me, you know, like in really long hair, it's like cross, you know, pendants and stuff. And so yeah, so this was like me. But anyway, so again, trying to fit back into Japan and trying to figure out like, okay, well, what am I? And then I went like a full 180 degrees and went like full-blown Asian. And for the rest of my high school, and which is one of the reasons I chose Sophia's International Legal Studies, because I thought I was going to study international relations, which was not. It was totally wrong. But anyway, I traveled. I studied a lot about like, you know, Asian relationship between the Japan and Asian countries at the time, because by 1982, Japan was affluent, and there were books like, you know, Japan is #1. And so Japan was nearing its height in terms of like economic prowess. And so there were books starting to come out. So what has Japan done after the war? And what does it mean in relation to the Asian countries, which we started kind of getting obsessed with, which is why I started traveling to countries like Philippines and stuff, backpacking, and we made a documentary actually in our third year in university with other students, trying to document what actually happened during the wartime years between Japan and these countries like the Philippines and Singapore and Indonesia and stuff. And so me being like a socialist-minded person by that time, I was thinking, okay, I need to be with the people. What can I do for the people? And I was thinking NGOs and NPOs. But then it wasn't kind of like, it didn't seem like I can change the world by working for an NGO and NPO. It didn't seem like it. And so, okay, so what do? Maybe I should figure out this like economy thing, because Japan seemed to be doing so well, and that's part of the equation. And I started looking at Japanese companies, but I couldn't do things like trading firms or banks. I needed to do something tangible, and very foundational, which is why I started looking into like gas companies, electronic companies, water companies, and steel company. And which is why I went to Nippon Steel, which was the biggest steel company at that time.
And it's very much in the news these days, Nippon Steel.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Several weeks.
Absolutely, and so that was really cool. I wanted to wear a helmet, steel toe. I interned 3 months in Yawata Steel firm. It was really nice. I really dug it. But then they positioned me into this new, again, this was 1987 and 1991, end of the bubble. And so everybody was like diversifying. And so Nippon Steel was making notebook computers, if you can believe it, when notebook computers were started to come out. And they put me in this notebook computer department, which was like, oh my God, because I thought computers were evil, because I'm a socialist, and so taking people's jobs away, And I was just like kind of blown away for a while. But then then my senpai started to, introduce me to like these books about how it was a cusp of the notion of internet was coming out. And so how computers and networks can free people from classes and give knowledge to those who previously would not had access to knowledge, and so I kind of started digging it. But then I started getting into this 30-year-old. I had this thing about being afraid of being 30-year-old because I needed to be somebody by age 30, and I was turning 28, and I wasn't making it in time. And I was like, oh crap, what do I do? And I was kind of like really thinking over and over again for about a year, 6 months maybe. And then at which point my senpai in Nippon Steel, who quit before me, says like, and I was discussing with him over it, I think he got sick of me. And he says like, Shuzo, if you're like that, you're freaking out, why don't you just quit and take a breather? Because you thought he would shut me up. Which I did, which I quit. But like people like me are generalists, I have no particular specific specialty. And I have nothing against Nippon Steel. It's not like, and you've never heard me mention animation once in my talk yet. I have absolutely no interest in animation back then. But then I quit. And then, so my senpai says, oh shit, you quit? And so he was consulting for Polygon, my current company, and because it was 1996, and 96 is this year where it's it's an epoch year. Why? 1995 is the year Pixar made Toy Story, first CG animation film. It saved the feature film industry. End of 95 came out with Sega Saturn, Sony PlayStation. So this is the advent of high performance 3D CGI game platforms, and Japan was killing it. And so it was a digital content bubble. Money was flowing, and it seemed kind of cool. And so Polygon was kind of riding the wave because we had our first hit, and we made a company with Namco at that time and Sony Computer Entertainment to make an $80 million feature film. It's like, cool, that sounds like really cool. Again, I have no interest in animation, but it just sounded cool. And they were saying Hollywood films. It's like, I can speak English. And that's how I got in.
That was actually one of the questions that I was going to ask. Like, I had sort of assumed that you grew up reading manga and watching anime and you were a fan, like, even though you didn't talk about it. But I didn't know that you actually had no particular interest in it. That didn't scare you to go into an industry that you were really not familiar with?
Well, I had no other choice because I quit without having a job. And it sounded sexy, right? And money was oozing at that time. But seriously though, so we made a film company, and again, this was 1996, and this was on the cusp of making Toy Story was just out. And so we studied, and there wasn't like books out there. And so we studied the end credit of Toy Story to figure out how they made it, right? And it seemed like there was like different lighting director, modeling supervisor, and that kind of stuff. And we just jotted it down, everything. And it seemed like, oh my, they are actually compartmentalizing this process, which is exactly like manufacturing, which I come from. And I understand because I was doing systems integration, consulting services. I was thinking, oh my God, this is like production, this is like manufacturing but digital. And that's the only reason, and they're using computers which I was working with in my previous job. And I can speak English. And so that was the only reason, the reason I thought, maybe I can do this,
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Because I was going to ask, not knowing anything about the steel industry, my impression of Nippon Steel is that it's not only this like hard manufacturing industry, but it's also a very Japanese company in my perception. And going from that kind of company to animation industry seems like a huge gap to me. But you're saying that what you learned in Nippon Steel was actually quite applicable to it's just manufacturing of different kind of items, different goods.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
Absolutely a good thing that I learned in a very short time I've spent in the steel mill, about like how collaboration amongst the people working there. Like this notion of Kaizen, which Japan is so famed for, devised by Toyota, the ground up system of innovating processes. Is absolutely essential, and so also utilizing computers to economize processes. That's absolutely essential. The thing that I was not cognizant of was the notion of story or character designs, that kind of stuff. But but the foundation is production. So yeah, it was absolutely. It was not by design, but it was totally cool, and which is the reason why I'm nobody was talking about that, from that perspective. Japanese education, I find that when you're good at math, oh, you're so smart, you're good at math, you're good at science, you're good at kokugo, but when you're good at drawing and stuff, there's oh, you're like an artist, or when you're good at music, you're like a musician. It doesn't have the same ring as being smart. When you're good at drawing, you're not being branded as being smart, but you're being smart in a different way, So there's a divide, intentionally or non-intentionally, between the so-called creatives and business people, which I find is, I'm trying to polite way of saying bullshit, but I just can't. So which is an angle that I was bringing forward that nobody really thought of, which is one of the reasons I did a TED talk 10 years ago about manufacturing animation. It's a 13-minute talk about how my notion of manufacturing and animation is coming together, and how we can bounce off against each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so animation is both art and business at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And processes.
And processes. So in the decades since you joined the industry, Japanese anime, the place of Japanese anime in the world has really changed dramatically, my perception, right? Tell us a little bit about that, your experience and observations of the evolution, growth, development of Japanese anime in the world. I don't know how many of you watched the NHK special that was last weekend or something about Japanese anime in the world. These people in war-torn Ukraine watching Japanese anime, or people in Palestine watching anime. So really it seems symbolic of not only the growth of Japanese anime as an art form, but also the place of Japan. Japanese anime seems to be a really vibrant growth area, when much of the rest of Japan, sadly, is not as energized. So tell us a little bit about your observation and experience of the changes in the industry.
Yeah, it's super fascinating, and again, I'm not an academic, but I have my theories as to why, which I devised over years of drinking in izakaya and professing my thoughts, which I compiled into a talk last year called WTF Japan, Why So Much Crazy Stuff Comes Out of Japan. And so I wish some academic like USDB actually verifies my theory, but I think there's various processes in which that happened. Again, like I said, like in the early 70s, nobody knew about Japan and what Japan was doing, But part of it is this lack of rights issue in the Japanese business mindset, because we're very trusty, we're not a legal society. Contracts don't happen much in Japan, and when it does, it's very small and it's after the fact. And so, so when you look at the history of animation and manga, the manga started like in the 60s. Animation really, 63, Tezuka Atom came out, Japanese animation started making original stuff. But I think we were not very protective about the property rights, and therefore we would allocate the rights to an agent, and it will be licensed in perpetuality, like in Europe and stuff. And so when you go, I'm sure like most of you have seen reruns of stuff that was shown like in the late 70s and early 80s that we've forgotten about, but you guys been seeing it over and over and over again, sometimes without knowing that it's Japanese stuff. And so there's a proliferation. It's like Google and Facebook when it's free and it's accessible, and at a certain time it kind of becomes like knowledgeable. You're acquainted to it, and then you start digging in. Oh, it's from Japan, and then you start like researching stuff, and that's part of it. And it took, and obviously with the internet, that's propelled it massively, because it's become so accessible. And because Japanese are such introverts, especially the animation and manga industry, even when people are interested, we don't really aggressively market it because we're terrible market people. And we have enough market in terms of our population, and therefore there became fan subs on the net where they would legally record it in subtitle and distribute amongst their peers, which was, I'm not against it because like we were not forthcoming in exporting it, but that became like a distribution channel without our doing, and that helped us in proliferating the material without us actually knowing or profiting. But when the time came, when especially after the streamers came in, and you can actually do it legit, because the streamers came in, we have a foundation of people who've grown up with it. And so that was another thing. The other thing is that the variety of stories that is created in Japan is just enormous. The freedom of expression in Japan is enormous. And again, I have a 90-minute talk just about this. But there are various reasons as to why. It's an island country. We've been a sovereign country for 2,685 years. We are a very volatile country in terms of nature. There's a like huge fire going in LA, but we are in the midst of Ring of Fire, where 75% of the earthquakes happen. We are the only country in the world where there's 4 tectonic plates intersecting each other. Therefore, we have a lot of earthquakes and live volcanoes. And so nature kicks our ass every so often. And we have to rebuild, and so we're always kind of like listening to nature. So we have a very empathetic nature in us because we're living through scary times, and we have a very good listening ability, I think, Because of that, our fundamental belief system is Shinto, which is animism, which is able to accommodate any sort of belief system. So like Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, everything. So interesting is that like the notion of religion is relatively new. It happened after 1866 when the Meiji Restoration. When we had like a pact between America, we had to translate religion. It's just like, what is religion? Okay, let's make the word Shukyo. And so after the Shukyo becomes like Christo-kyo, Bukkyo, whatever, Kyo, whereas Shinto is Michi, pact, it's a belief system. And so because of that, it's very, very accommodating. And the thing about Shinto is that it's non-doctrinal. And so there are very few do's and don'ts in our activities, which is why there's so much variety of stuff from all age groups, from isekai to VL to like even hentai and stuff, which in many cultures it's just not doable, right? And so when in the time of the internet, where like reality is that in society only 20% at most of the people are iketeru, are cool kids, and the rest are not really cool. But most of the stories in Western storytelling are about aspirational characters, like iketeru people, or people who are not iketeru, climbing up the ladder to become a cool kid, Whereas the Japanese stories are, there are stuff like that as well, but it touches upon very different levels of people in all different areas, which is why the 80% of people who are not being noticed in other storytelling worlds is like, oh my god, this is a story about me. And which is why it may not be the mass market, which amasses like 250 million, box office, but it has a certain audience, And Japan keeps on turning these things up, and because of the globalization of content, because of the internet and that kind of stuff, and just a general interest towards this Japanese thing, the interest has absolutely grown. And you say that like other parts of Japan have been stagnant and not as energized, right? I mean, yes, but like that from the outer perspective, I think that's part of our sexiness, is that it's not the design, but when the rest of the world, like it's kind of the same thing that happened during Sakoku in like what 16 something, eh? 1600s, right? For 215 years, right? And we were shut away from the rest of the world because we kicked out the Portuguese and Spanish, so we were just cut off. But that was when the Edo culture like just magnified, and it was a very distinct culture that was created. I think the years in the past 23 years was kind of like that, where the rest of the world was just run by like GAFA, and smartphones came out, like all this new technology came out. And we were just like on our own, very introspective. But not by design, but it created a real weird circle, where from the outside people say, oh my god, Japanese must know something because they seem kind of chill and they're not like interested like in Bitcoin and that kind of stuff. It may be, oh, there's this ikigai must have something to do with this, or like, oh, maybe I should try kintsugi, maybe I can figure that out, I think there's a certain sexiness in us being stagnant over these years, and I think that's part of the fuel in the interest that happened during these years.
I had never thought of stagnancy as sexy, but that you just gave me a new perspective on things. Let me ask you one final, like a very different kind of question before we open up the conversation to the audience. So in the conversation, you mentioned several times the fact that you're a fluent English speaker helped in your, certain moments in life or career decisions, etc. And you also made several references to education in U.S. versus Japan. We are here at the Center for Global Education. We're doing this event in English. What are your thoughts on what it means to be global, like what it means to have a global outlook today? What can universities do to cultivate global sensibilities? What can students do to foster their own global mindset?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. But what my experience, living in the States at that particular time, it was tough. I kind of hated it, back then. But what that allowed me to do, and it's I also coming back. It's like I went to an all-boys school, a Jesuit boys school, all boys. And I had to skip down a grade because I flunked the high school exam. And so, for 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds, there's miles of difference, especially if you come from Palo Alto, right? And so I went full-on Japanese after trying to go full-on American. And what that allowed me to do is to have a really distinct perspective of things. I've learned recently that they call people like us third culture kids. where you grow up in a culture different from your parents or ancestors, and because there was a time of being lonely and alone and introspective for so long, it allowed me to have a perspective, mostly by myself, but in relation to others. And knowing English as well, allows me to speak to others, but it's basically, I speak to others as an introspection about myself, being my profession, being able to go to different countries and speak with other people. So at the end, knowing Japanese as well, again, it's a different language. It has its pros and cons. But it's mostly about being introspective, knowing what you are, knowing what you represent, why you are, how you are, and what is your story. And I think that's true. I think that's the global element.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
That was not the kind of answer I was sort of imagining, because isolation, alienation, you're saying that, it's painful, of course,
Mhm.
but it's also an opportunity for growth, opportunity for reflection, introspection, and growth. And when you say, when we think global, we tend to kind of think outwards, but you're actually saying global is inward.
Global, exactly. Global allows you to be in touch with others that are different from you.
Mhm.
And the more global, you're being in touch with more different people than where you are. But you are what you are, and you will never be what you are not. And when you get to my age, like 57, you start thinking, why the hell am I, And then you go back to your roots, look back to your parents, your grandparents, where you come from, that kind of stuff. There's a reason why you are, And so I think being global is the ability to be able to be in touch with a different lot of people, which gives you a different, more introspection about yourself, because there's more bouncing boards, Whereas, if you're just very domestic, you're always with the people you've grown up with, same kind of people.
Yeah.
There's a very limited bouncing board, sounding board,
Yeah.
So I think that's being global is the ability to be able to touch others, to different types of people, for the purpose of knowing yourself, and also having the ways to represent yourself.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, let's open it up for questions, comments from all of you. I'm sure you have. Yeah, go ahead.
Much for your talk. I actually appreciate that you talk about yourself instead of your company and everything, because how should I say this? I'm from Indonesia, and I'm learning in agriculture right now, so I have no connection in whatever you're doing. But I feel like your story touches a lot in the sense that I also kind of experienced what you did, trying to be Indonesian but Japanese at the same time, kind of thing. So I have two questions actually. First one, it must have taken guts and tenacity and some kind of people skill to be where you are right now, because moving from from steel company to animation, I feel like that takes guts. To stay for a long time, I think that takes tenacity. And I feel like it takes a certain kind of people skill for you to have been with your senpai saying, yeah, there's a job over here. So what were the kinds of values that you were holding on to one, moving your, from steel to animation? And that's my first question. My second question, why did you decide to stay? Because in a sense that you weren't planning to be in animation anyway, but what made you stay?
Yeah, those are really great questions, and things that I actually think about. I've been thinking about at a certain age, And so my life, if I plot it out, people would say, oh, it's quite tumultuous, But being in the midst of it, it didn't feel so, especially after my working life, it didn't feel really tumultuous to me. And it was hard, because animation is freaking hard, and our company went bankruptcy, God knows how many times. And many times we were not able to pay our employees on time. So we've been through that, but still, it didn't seem that tumultuous. And and when I look back on, so, you know, Steve Jobs' commencement address at Stanford, like connecting the dots, right? And basically saying that you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect the dots looking backward. And he's talking about his life of being an orphan, coming from a Syrian parent and an American mother, you know, just by accident he went to a calligraphy class, which was the reason became one of the reasons he created Macintosh in the true font, right? But he only knew that after the fact. And so I'm thinking, it's like, and he says the second sentence, you have to find something that you can believe in, karma, destiny, whatever. And to your question, I mean, what do you believe in? What is the guiding principle? That's the hardest question. And so genius like him, he's got something. But most lay people spend their whole life trying to find what that core thing is that they can depend on. And for me, I look back and I figured out that it's, for me, I play music. I've been playing, I mean, I've not been interested in animation, but I was always interested in music. And to this day, and if you look at my profile, I want to be a musician still. I haven't given up yet. So to me, nori, groove, is that guiding principle. Whether I'm grooving or not, and it can be a bad groove or a good groove, but I'm always cognizant of my groove. And so I'm always cognizant of the groove of my company. I'm cognizant of the groove of the project. And that's how I measure, you know, is it a good groove or a bad groove? If it's a bad groove, I try to move away as much as possible, as soon as possible. If it's a good groove, I try to stick with it. Or like in terms of running a company, organization, if the groove of the company is low, I try to find something to lift it up. If they're grooving like they're stoned, I have to tame them down, you know. But when I explain, I'm going to explain this. So what my role is as a president of the company, I define it as a group master. And so that, I think that, for me, that notion pertains to most everything. I mean, business is also group as well. So that's the thing. Second question was what?
Why did you continue?
Oh, that's kind of, yeah, I mean, it wasn't by design. So I mean, again, the entrance into this industry was very, it was very greedy. It seemed sexy, you know? And it was really nice for 2 years. Very nice. I went to Hollywood, talked with like executives at Sony Pictures. It was kind of, we didn't do anything because we didn't have a story. It was dumb. It was just really dumb. Burning money for 2 years, but it was fun. But then the bubble crashed, and then we pulled back and went back to Polygon. And then it was dirt poor all of a sudden. And then the founder of the company, we brought in investors, they saved our company, supported us for 10 years. But the founder and the investor got into a huge fight, tried to set a coup d'etat, which I was part of the founder, but then we failed. And he departed, and I was the hostage. And so it's like, okay, well, if you're gone, you're the only one who seems like you can manage, and if you're gone, the company's gone, your staff is gone, and so it's kind of held hostage, which is the reason I stayed. But in reality, though, I mean, most of these people were people I hired as well, and I really, again, it was rough. We didn't have any money, but we were kind of young, and and we were just like, it was a group thing, and we had no success story, and so we were always looking upwards to find that success. And it was kind of like when you have a pure notion to succeed in a certain way, it gets you going, and that was why. And after a certain while, we kind of succeeded, and then people started knowing us, and so there was always fulfillment, recognition, yeah. And then after a certain while, when I find the notion, this my guiding principle group, and I said I have no specialty. I can't draw or crap, and it's not like I graduated from an MBA or anything. I went to the Department of Law, but I never wanted to be a lawyer. But I figured out I love actually facilitating a place, metaphysical place where people gather and try to attain something. And that's what I enjoy. And our industry is fantastic for that. And that's what I still enjoy.
So thank you very much, Mr. Shiota. So I have a question about anime manufacturing. So I think that Japan is very competitive in anime. And I think that that comes from both inspiration and manufacturing. But I'm a student studying AI-related stuff, and I'm very interested in how AI is changing the rules in anime manufacturing, because I know some studios are using AI for colorization. They only draw a sketch and use AI to colorize it. And also, some studios are making anime films that almost generated by AI. They may only draw some keyframes and use AI to generate frames between them. And so I'm wondering, in your opinion, so how AI is going to change the rules of anime manufacturing, and how studios or companies should embrace this AI in the decades?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question and a huge topic constantly. And I mean, short answer, me personally, I'm embracing it. I see no choice other than to embrace it. But as a very, very smart tool, I don't foresee a recent future whereby AI is going to take over most of what we do. Absolutely not. But I think it's something that will be very, very useful for us, which we should embrace. And it's kind of funny because I was telling on my Facebook timeline, my Western counterparts are just like freaking out, like crazy about AI, whereas like my Eastern people are not as, or not really, kind of like, don't worry, And I think that again, that sort of has this like different mentality where we find animism in all things like cameras and stuff, And for us, I think AI is another animate being that is coming into existence. So yeah, it's. I am not afraid that human jobs will be taken away by AI. And because, I mean, there was not a moment where I did not talk to ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT so many things. But it's great at finding knowledge that has been out there already and structuring them. But stories are, in for things like TikTok, very short form things, where it's consumed and forgotten like in second. Maybe, there will be content that is just made by AI and it can stand. But in terms of like 90-minute films and a big screen where people invest money and their time, 2 hours and stuff, or books, I don't see a near future where it's fully done by AI. It will be a great sounding board for artists to pick and choose, but it's great. AI is great at structuring. However, entertainment is a great part of it is structure, like the hero's journey, the react structure, all that kind of stuff. But what makes it different is this really minute differences of deconstruction, which only humans can find, I think, the way to pick and choose.
Thank you very much. But maybe I can ask another question. So yes, I can see that the soul of an anime film is a story of itself, not the way how we manufacture it. But what do you think for normal? Anime creation needs a lot of labor. You need a lot of artists to do a lot of things, and now you don't need so many people. So, and will that change? Will that change this industry? So more smaller studios are now being able to make big movies, or if some individuals also being able to to create a few minutes shortcuts. And so, I mean, so do you think there's something related to, do you think that we need to divide a film that is made by AI or made by human, or do you think that it doesn't matter?
Well, again, I don't foresee a near future where, again, the things like a feature film made by AI would be interesting. They can be. I mean, it can be made, but would it be interesting for people to watch? Probably not. We will use it, I mean, there are things that we would rather not do because it's very, very tedious. For instance, like in CGI, you know, everything is virtual, but it's in a 3D environment. And when a cube hits a floor, it has to touch the floor, but because it's not physical and tangible, it can penetrate. And so we would look at each and every frame to see where penetration is, and it sucks because it's boring. And so, I mean, AI can take that, you know? But, like, the thing is that AI can pull out stuff. However, it's not going to be 100%, and we would want to iterate. You know, the creation process is iteration, iteration after iteration after iteration. And the thing is that AI, because it's visually based, right? And so iteration is prompt based, and it's very, very hard to iterate. It's like trying to get 100% answer from your kid. It's just impossible. And so after a while, it's okay, forget it, I'm gonna do it, and we're gonna have to fix it. And so it's the ease of fixing it, but it's not there. I mean, motion capture, sort of the same sort of like discussion was made when the technology of motion capture was made, which motion capture is just like you may see these suits people and then people say, well, you don't need animators anymore. No, we still have animators after like 30 years of that happening. Because it can make a certain type of animation, and initially it was very, very tedious to iterate, and so we're saying, well, because it's so tedious to iterate, we're just going to animate from scratch by keyframe. So unless there becomes, I mean, I would love for Yatos to be smarter. I mean, it's getting harder and harder to create. Computers are getting more expensive. Applications are getting more expensive. Labor costs are more expensive. And so I would love to cut the cost of production. So I'm really, really for AI tools getting smarter, but I don't see the entire processes being overtaken where there's going to be a world where this is an AI film and there's a human film. Which film do you like? I mean, it's not going to happen in a while.
Thank you very much.
So you talked about how there's need for there to be, like you noticed a difference between the creators off in their own circle in this animation bubble, right? The creators are off in their own circle and the businessmen are off in this circle, and neither the two shall, get in each other's business. But so far in your journey, your career journey, have you seen any improvement in that interconnectedness between the business side of animation and the creative side? Thank you.
Well, in Hollywood, for instance, that's already happening. Because like people who are lawyers, or even like scientists in NASA, they go to Pixar and stuff, and so the mingling of different professions, accountants, going into Disney. I mean, so the mingling of different professions have happened in the States. And why? Because it is a lucrative business and they can earn a lot of money. In Japan, it's progressed because the animation industry is becoming prominent, is being realized. The government is designing this new 10-year plan based on content. So it's I think it will be much more, and I'm hoping people like you guys join us because again we need smart people, and we need people from diverse backgrounds with different abilities to fortify our business. So I'm hoping it's starting, it's better, it's getting better, but not as much as like say our Western counterparts in Japan. See, what I'm trying to do is, because me coming from an industry that is like manufacturing and animation and saying, professing that there are commonalities, the other thing that I'm really professing these days is that the one thing that drives us regardless of what your profession is story. And story is this one thing that Homo sapiens have been able to do compared to other homos. And we're just, everything's a story, And when people say like, storytellers, people think like filmmakers, animation, but like bankers, they're just like, currency is intangible. If an alien came and look at what we're transacting, it's like paper, or even like now, like smartphones and it's like the hell, But we think that's a value, So everything is story driven, like going to restaurants and at the end of the day, the ingredients is rice and fish. But why do you pay more money? Because of the ambience, because of the presence, that kind of stuff. Everything's a story. So in that way, we all have commonalities, and that gives us the ability to interact. But we just don't know it yet.
Thank you very much. Yours one's like very thoughtful. The ideas global is also inward, not only outward. So it really gives kind of ideas to maybe all of you. You can act, react on these kinds of possibilities and opportunity existing in the world. And we have very nice questions from the Indonesia, from the maybe
One from Zambia.
Zambia. So there are maybe possibilities to start these kinds of business. Animations is not just art. So I think all the young students, I think they learn from your experiences, not doing some business from the animations, and then how your experiences working with still companies, Jump Studio, these animations arts still work, and you became such a successful business person in the world. So for me, it's really inspiring, this story. I think all our students, they learn from your experiences. Thanks lots for giving this valuable time. And also Professor Yoshihara, thank you very much for making this dialogue very interesting. So gives again big hands